Welcome back to 21st Century Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Bob Hieronimus, and our executive producer and research assistant is Dr. Laura Kortner, and our engineer is Anita Brockington. We have 3 guests in our first hour, and we plan to talk about Baltimore and art. But first, I just learned this morning that our dear friend Walt Belly, songwriter, bass player for the Light Band who took my bus to Woodstock in 1969, has passed on. We will miss him greatly, and especially, of course, his wife Shirley will. And Shirley, if you're listening tonight, we will be sending you that important DVD soon. Well, welcome back to 21st Century Radio, as I noted there. You have heard me talking about Volume 2 of our Yellow Submarine book for over the past few years. Well, it is finally finished, and we delivered it to the printers on Friday. We expect to have books in hand just in time for the holidays. For all of you who are Beatles fans, and you have just fans in your family, etc., and for all of you who have a Beatles fan in your life, remember, we are just in time for the holidays. Our new book on the Beatles, Yellow Submarine, is called It's All in the Mind, and it's going on pre-sale today. All kinds of discounts and bonus prizes, but only through December 31st, when the sale price is over. Go to www.yellowsubmarinebook.com. Couldn't be simpler. That's yellowsubmarinebook.com. Please join us on Facebook, too, over at Yellow Submarine Book, where we hang out with the original animators for the original film and answer questions like, what does it mean? What that we all live in a yellow submarine. Want to know? Buy the book. Now, on with the show. About a month or so ago, I learned that the Baltimore Museum of Fine Art was giving a bathroom of space devoted to the hanging of artwork of John Waters. Now, in my opinion, this is wrong. It is pathetic. I'm not saying John Waters' work isn't interesting. It is. I'm just saying that it's not fine art. My own artwork is not fine art. But if Baltimore Museum of Fine Art wanted to display the work of a Baltimore artist, then our guest this hour, James Voshell, is a perfect match. We have invited him and his collaboration team to join us tonight because they have just released an astoundingly beautiful book called James W. Voshell, His Life and Art, and it is written by his one-time student and lifelong friend, William M. Waters, who is also joining us tonight, along with Jim's life partner and fellow artist, Lynne Jones. Together, we hope to show you over the radio that Jim Voshell's brilliance at depicting the Baltimore that we all love is now available in a gorgeous coffee table-sized book, preserving it forever. Now, Jim Voshell and I share a very deep attachment to Baltimore's greatest mayor, William Donald Schaefer, as we both worked on the Mayor's Advisory Commission of Arts and the Culture, painting murals around the city. Baltimore is a hard time for artists to survive in economically, yet Jim was vastly successful in Baltimore and elsewhere. His super realism approach attracted great attention, and as he used it to preserve what he observed in the city's streets. Mayor Schaefer adored Jim's murals and praised the quality of his brilliance. As I read Jim's life story, I can't help but to interject the many parallels that we've had along the way. One of the biggest things I profited by in my own relationship with Uncle Don Schaefer, that I used to call him that all the time, was his advice to me about surrounding yourself with intelligent women. If you want to succeed, that is what he did, and of course, that's what I've done. And that is what, well, I'll never forget tangling with the mighty Joan Bareska, who was his point person on many a mural project. I did many murals for Don Schaefer as well as posters, but his posters for mayor and governor campaigns. When Don Schaefer asked me to go to Egypt and establish a sister city relationship with Luxor, Egypt, and Alexandria, I jumped at the chance, and my wife Zahara and I completed that task to his great satisfaction. But I have not succeeded in winning over the art community in Baltimore. Baltimore has yet to understand my artwork, but it doesn't really matter. Eventually, my wife, Dr. Queen Zahara, stepped in, and that's all I needed. I have achieved more success in other countries, ironically, than in my own hometown, the United Kingdom, Germany, Russia, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, Brasilia, etc., etc. But enough about me. Let's introduce our three guests waiting patiently and jump into the life story of Jim Voshell. I can't wait to find out what other parallel experiences we shared in common. Welcome to 21st Century Radio. Jim Voshell, William Waters, and Lynne Jones. Are y'all there?
We're here.
Good God.
We're all here.
That was Uncle Jim. Okay.
Hi, Bob.
Hi, Jim. Jim was born and raised in rural, pre-gentrified town of St. Michael's. Would you share how this affected your work?
Well, we lived in the country. My father was a farmer, and right from maybe 8 years of age, I was always interested in the woods, the nature, and the river shore, and I used to take many walks through the areas, and I'd pick up found objects, and I would build things. My dad had tools, and I would borrow them, and I would, and I would borrow his enamel paints and get a brush or two, and I would do images of wildlife, and I just had this intensity of needing to create something and build things, and I realized that making art in some form was a powerful thing. When my relatives would come to visit, they would have adult conversations, and as a little kid, if I put a handful of drawings into someone's hand, they would stop for a moment. They would pat me on the back and tell me how wonderful they were, and I felt a sense of power from this.
Mm-hmm.
And then in high school, I realized if I drew something for the teacher on the blackboard and I put a drawing on my front of my term paper, I would get better grades. So I thought this is very powerful.
Awesome, yeah.
Art has I can make this work for me. So Bill's telling me I should stop. Okay. Next question.
All right. Next question is, what is meant by, and William or Bill can answer this. Actually.
Bill is fine.
Okay, Bill. Bill, what is meant by his, Jim's being a social realist?
Well, that's a great question in the sense that Jim is a explicit realist, and you look at his paintings, you know exactly what you're seeing, and lots of the scenes, particularly in Baltimore, we get an awful lot of feedback. People who've said, "I've seen that corner," but the irony of that is that Jim selects things with a sense of the symbol that lies in the image itself. And as someone who came across the Bay and settled in and became trained at Maryland Institute and began feeling the grit of Baltimore, by the time Jim was establishing his first studios and becoming part of the community in that regard, and seeing Baltimore in ways that, for me, I could never see it without his help. He takes that leap into social realism in a sense that he's sharing with you, the very texture of the life experience, and not just a snapshot.
Well, his father was a huge influence on him. Lynn, would you like to say anything about that?
About Jim's
His father's
influence on him?
Yeah.
Well, I never had the honor of meeting his dad. He passed away before I came into the picture with Jim. But he still talks about him quite regularly. He looks very much like his dad. He has most of his genes, and he was a hard-working man. From what I understand, he was a great farmer. He knew jobs had to be done. He was very regimented in how he worked, and he distilled that in Jim also.
Well, that's great. That's fantastic. Those kind of things seldom happen anymore. Jim was granted a teaching deferment during the Vietnam War. Why was that?
Well, I don't know why, other than that teachers were able to get deferments.
Yeah.
I think it pretty much depended on your local draft board.
Mm-hmm.
Which was local on the Eastern Shore. It was not in St. Michael's. It was in Easton, which was 10 miles away. But, from the watermen and the farmers, it seemed like if you had an authentic position as a teacher with a college degree and everything, that you were given a little leadway as far as being drafted.
That's right. That's exactly right. I was a conscientious objector through my service to, places like the White House and things like that on my work,
Right.
on America's symbolism and that kind of thing. And
Right.
and I was very fortunate to be able to do that because all of my friends were going in the Army, going to Vietnam at that time.
Right.
Well, Jim, you would... I'm sorry. Go ahead.
When Jim was my teacher at Parkville, I was able to concentrate on his classes, but through the lens of knowing that I could be graduating into the draft, and I ended up with a high lottery number, and that made all the difference.
Right. Well, Jim attended Micah. What was his experience on that at Micah at that time?
Jim was accepted at Micah into the education program, so he got a general training in all the fundamentals, but was not studying specifically in the School of Sculpture or Painting, and the opportunity for me would follow from that he became a teacher and traded 2 years of service to Baltimore County for much of his tuition being paid. And that's how I ended up meeting him at Parkville High School.
Jim said to me recently that he saw my painted bus one time as he was, I guess he was at class or teaching or something like that. Is that true, Jim?
I didn't quite understand what you said.
Oh, the bus that I painted.
Oh, your bus.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I was looking out the school window after school had ended, and one of the I guess it was a homeroom student that I had in one of my homerooms. I saw wander out the front door of the school, and she hopped into this painted Volkswagen bus, and it was quite decorated. And I didn't know who owned that bus at the time.
Oh.
But I assumed it was you.
Yeah, well, yes, it was. She was a brilliant person. I remember her.
Oh, the student, yeah.
Yes, she was brilliant, and
she was quite striking, as I recall.
Oh, well, of course, Jim.
And she was dressed in an outfit that I could only say is Indian.
Right,
Indian
exactly.
costume.
That's exactly. She was the most unusual person, and she listened to the most esoteric music I've ever listened to. Not really. Well, Jim, time break. We have a break coming now. Break time on 21st Century Radio with our guests James Voshell, William Waters, and Lynne Jones. The book is Jim Voshell, His Life and Art by William M. Waters. I mispronounce it. I think it's Mycelium Press. Is that correct? Mycelium Press? And you can order it from www.myceliumpress.com or go to jamesvoshell.com. These links are easy to find on our Facebook page on 21st Century Radio.
Hello, I'm Sean Astin. I play Samwise Gamgee in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and you're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob Hieronimus. Bob Hieronimus, you rock.
Yeah, we still rock around here. All right, welcome back to 21st Century Radio with our guest James Voshell. Actually, it's James W. Voshell, William Waters, and Lynne Jones. Jim's book is Jim Voshell, His Life and Art by William M. Waters, Mycelium Press. Did I pronounce that correctly or not?
Mycelium Press, that's correct.
I got a
yes,
beat.
and may I give the correct address online? There is no www. It's simply myceliumpress.llc.
Okay, thank you.
And that's mycelium with one L.
Linked on our Facebook page. Yes, that's right. Okay, now the big question now. Actually, it's not a question in a way. Jim graduated from Micah. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Jim dedicated himself to telling the true story of Baltimore streets, and this is where I think his many of the paintings he did around Baltimore belong and should be in the Baltimore Museum of Art. That's my bias. The question, of course, is tell us about how you did that, Jim. How did you dedicate yourself to telling the true story of Baltimore streets?
Well, I've always been in love with nature. I grew up in nature, and I'm now living in nature. But when I moved to the city of Baltimore, it was a completely different world for this country boy. And I realized that most of nature was paved over. The entire city was concrete.
That's right.
So I thought, how does that affect people? And I started. Of course, I've always been receptive to seeing, and as I looked at the city, I see the people, I see the children, I see the effects of living in a concrete world, all jumbled up with many people. And I thought, this has got a story. This has got. I have to make some comments about this visually. And I started roaming the streets, and I shoot photographs. And I shot thousands, literally tens of thousands of photographs. And as I captured things that were exciting and challenging, I would make decisions about what I thought other people, perhaps visitors to a gallery, might want to see if they were interested in what I was producing. So it just became a lengthy process, and I spent approximately 22 years shooting probably 80,000 photographs and doing approximately 500 paintings. So it was a long trip, and my career has lasted me 50 years, and somehow it's supported itself.
Well deserved, Jim. You graduated from Micah and began teaching in high schools, teaching in as many as 7 classes a day, and you succeeded entering various contests and winning with your portraits of, especially that portrait of Old Fish Joe. Joe. Yes.
That was from my first studio, right?
Yeah. Hey, you should talk. We'll talk about that studio because you had a lot of big parties in that studio, didn't you?
Oh well, I had some, not a lot, but some. Now this was down on Marketplace before Harbor Place and all the development of the harbor. So it was an abandoned flop house. It had a transom over the door that said, "Clean beds, 50 cents." So it was a place for the winos and the poor people to in cold winter nights to find a bed for a cheap price. So, I rented the floor of this warehouse and for a very cheap rent. It was $40 a month rent, I think. And that's where I set my studio up. And I got to meet all of these street people. I just walked around. I was 2 blocks from the block. I was just a block or so from the police station. The shot tower was nearby. I could look out my studio window and see the submarine in the inner harbor. Connolly's Seafood Restaurant.
Oh, wonderful place.
Was right at the end of the block, which I love to eat there.
Yeah.
As long as Donald Schaefer used to love to eat there.
Yeah, he used to take me there. Yes.
And I was only there approximately 2 years before the city of Baltimore bought my building, and the community college of what was the community college of
Baltimore? CCB. Yeah, community college
of Baltimore. Yeah, took over the space where my studio had been, and I have a photograph in the book of the demolition of my block.
Yes.
The building right in the center of that photograph is the back end of my studio, which was a 90-foot-long room that had the fish market on one end and the police horse stables on the back end.
That must have smelled good.
Oh, it depended on which way the wind was blowing.
Yeah, I bet.
But the space was unbelievable. It was 35 feet wide, 11-foot ceilings, and it ran for 90 feet through this building. I had huge wall space to hang very large paintings, so it was ideal. And I really was just getting started when they decided to tear the whole block down.
Oh, yes.
So then I had to go looking for another studio, but that's another story.
Yes, it is. And is that the one that burned down?
Actually, it is. Yes, it was 1718 Frederick Avenue.
Oh, what a tragedy! What a tragedy.
That was in West Baltimore.
Yeah.
Just a block or two past Union Square Park.
You lost $31,000 worth of your work.
Well, I had just brought back a show from all the paintings from a show that, of course, you never really sell out at any of these shows. But it was a number of, I think it was about 18 pieces, and it was most of them I hung back up on the wall, and it was only a day or two later that the fire took place, and it pretty much destroyed all the paintings. Now, the tax people would only give me the cost of the materials, and it burned up all my clothes and most of my furniture. So I had a big problem on my hands here. I think I had $400 to my name and a burned-out studio. So the landlord didn't have any insurance, and I didn't have any insurance. So he decided, the city forced him to rebuild the building. They couldn't leave a burned-out building there. So he decided to make a deal with me. I could live there rent-free for 6 months if I did all the interior refinishing and painting and what have you. And he would fix all the electric and the structural parts of the building. And then after that point, he would charge me $200 a month rent.
Oh, my. Well,
because I was getting the whole 4-story building for $100 a month. So
that experience.
Well, you have to learn to live poor when you're an artist.
Yes, you do. That's right.
Yeah.
Hey, when early on, did you have any problem in how many meals did you use to eat a day?
Oh, well, when I was at Marketplace, just 2 blocks away was the Lombard Street Market.
Oh, fortunate. How fortunate.
All the Jewish shops that were along Lombard Street Market.
Good sandwiches.
Atman's Delicatessen.
Yeah.
and all. I could walk over there, and with $30, I could buy enough food for a month.
Hmm.
So I ate very well.
You like cars a great deal, don't you?
I love cars.
Now you got an Austin Healey at one time.
When I was teaching and I had a salary. You're right.
Those are.
Well, that car was delightful. The trouble is, I bought it brand new.
Oh my!
It cost a total of $4,000.
Big time
at the time.
Yeah.
And I drove it for 13 months. And I had to work at another nighttime job plus my teaching job in order to make the payments on the thing.
Oh boy.
So at the end of that, when I decided to quit teaching, I decided that car had to go. So I traded it in on another much cheaper sedan, and then later I ended up getting the old 51 Chevy panel truck, which I bought from a friend, an artist friend, who knew about it down in Tennessee, who used to live in my building at Marketplace.
That's remarkable.
So I went down with some friends, and we paid him $200 for the truck.
200? Is this old gray?
$200 for old gray.
Old gray.
Now the windows, some of the windows were busted out, and most of the lights, some of the lights worked, but not all of them. But I drove that thing from Friendsville, Tennessee, back to Baltimore in 18 hours.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And it made it. That was the thing. It made it.
And do you still have it?
I then took it down to my dad's farm, or where he worked, and I used his tools and his spray gun to spray a coat of paint on it, and I put plexiglass windows in to replace the broken glass and fixed all the lights, and I drove it back to Baltimore, and it became my main vehicle for the next 30 years.
Is it still around?
That's incredible, right?
Yeah, it is.
No, he used to woo me in that truck. I sat on a milk crate, and in the winter you had to have a blanket to cover up. In the summertime, cranked open the windows with a wrench. And for his windshield wipers, he had a bent coat hanger that he held out the window on his side, and he pulled the blade up and down. So it was quite rustic.
Well, it's the life of an artist. I mean, that's the way it is.
Oh, yeah, and it is. And it works.
Yeah, and it works. You get it done.
I got enough of a tax write-off for my art business to pay for any repairs that I ever had to make on that thing.
Well, one of my favorite piece of your works is called The Defender.
Oh, The Defender, yes, my self-portrait.
Would you please describe it? Because this is a powerful piece. I mean, our living in the kind of neighborhoods we had to live in, you were defending yourself.
Well, yeah, I mean, I couldn't have lived there without weapons. So I think, was it you that took the photograph, Lynn?
Yes, he superimposed the photograph. We would have target practice out here at the farm, my farm, for many years. And the firearms were from that session. He didn't actually go out on the street. He didn't feel threatened enough to stand out with all of his armaments on Frederick Avenue. But, he superimposed it onto the front of his building.
Lynn, would you describe what that looked like, what he was holding and how he was doing that?
Yes.
It's a powerful piece.
He was leaning against, in the painting, he's leaning against his doorway. He's got his Winchester rifle in one hand, and there's a bottle of Jack Daniels at his feet. There's another rifle he's got in his other hand. His door is open that said, "Keep off the steps." And his kitty cat, Francoise, is peering out the door.
Oh, Francoise. She lived to be 21 years old.
21 years old. And if you look very closely in his sunglasses, you can see the reflection of old gray.
Oh, is that right? I'll look again then. I'll look again.
Yeah.
Well, in living in some of the neighborhoods I had to live in, it was really just weird. Mainly, my life was almost taken twice. And the only reason why they were going after me was I painted a mural for a black nightclub. And they decided that, coming from North Carolina, they decided that I should be dead for that. I didn't have a gun, though, unfortunately. I'm glad I didn't, because I probably would have used it.
Well, mine were always right behind my door.
Good going.
And it was very funny because when people would sit on my steps doing drugs and whatever, I would holler out my studio window and tell them to get off the steps.
Yeah.
Well, they would just tell me to go myself.
Uh-huh.
So I would walk down behind my stairs, behind the door, and I would cock the rifle. And I would open the door, and there would never be anybody there.
Yeah, good doing. That does it.
The sound of the gun was enough to scare them down the street. So, that was a common affair. That happened a lot.
Well, I'm glad you're still alive for sure. Another parallel, Jim, between my life and your life was Oprah Winfrey. You want to tell your story about the time you were with... Oh, we got to take a break. Time out on 21st Century Radio, and we'll come back with that. Our guests, of course, are James Voshell, William Waters, and Lynne Jones. That's a harmonica. Wow. This book is Jim Voshell, His Life and Art by William M. Waters, Mycelium Press. And you can also order it from jameswvoshell.com.
Hello, this is Richard Taylor down in Wellington, New Zealand. We looked after the special makeup effects, armor weapons, creatures and miniatures for Lord of the Rings. And I'm here with 21st Century Radio and my good friend Bob Hieronimus way up there in America.
Oh, boy, do I miss those guys. I really do. Well, welcome back to 21st Century Radio with our guests James Voshell, William Waters, and Lynne Jones. Let me ask this question before Oprah Winfrey, and that is, how did you and Lynne get together?
How did Lynn and I get together?
Yeah.
Well, we met at the Washington County Museum of Fine Arts.
Oh, nice place.
I had known her husband previously. He ran a gallery, and I had a small show in his gallery at one time. But I had connections with the Washington County Museum. I had a couple of one-man shows there, and they actually bought one of my paintings.
Wow.
That's in their possession. And I was invited to some sort of an affair that was taking place there, a fundraiser or something. And I happened to step out, to get a breath of fresh air, and here was this very nice-looking woman standing out on the veranda of the museum, and I just started talking to her, and she was pregnant, and we got along very well, and I found out that she and her husband would eventually, about a year later or so, move out to the farm that we're at now, and so we kept in touch, and she had some parties that I attended, and then I had some parties that they attended, and we just got to be close friends. And I used, because I was in the city, and at the time my dad died, and they had to leave the place that we lived in the country, so I had no access to nature and to the country. So I would come out here to the farm and enjoy my visits, and I would take photographs of the barn and the wood textures and various things, and that's how we met. And when she got a divorce, she invited me to move my studio from Frederick Avenue.
How fortunate.
Which was getting very dangerous. I was beaten up once on the street. I had my studio robbed a couple of times. And she invited me to move my studio out here to the barn. It's an old barn that was built before the Civil War. It needed a bit of repairs, and it took me about a year to restore it all, to make it a working studio. And that was about 30 years ago. That was in 1992. I made the move from the inner city to here. So
we're going to be running out of time soon, so I'm going to forget about Oprah Winfrey. But,
oh, you want to know about Oprah Winfrey?
Oh, no, we can. Much more important, I would like to have William tell us what's in this book.
Well, that's a wonderful question.
That's right.
First and foremost, it follows Jim's life chronologically, and it's a total of 10 chapters with a prologue and an epilogue, and it brings you right up to date with a work that Jim was handling as a commission over the 2.5 years, almost 3 years that it took us to complete the project. So it's a painting called The Studio Wall. It's in many respects autobiographical, and it's a commission for dear friends in North Carolina. And just about the time we wrapped up the book project, the painting was complete and delivered. So if you look closely at that painting, which I believe was sold for $24,000, you see the value of a life in all of the artifacts that Jim had collected over the years and assembled in that wall. And it was an amazing accomplishment, and it was a wonderful thing to have that occur at the same time we were completing the book. And I guess the only other thing I would add to that is that the book is it's the culmination of an agreement that Jim and I sort of made over the years together, when he would always tell people, whether it was at a party or when we gathered together with friends, he'd say, "Bill's going to write my biography someday. He is going to get all of my letters and my correspondence and my copybooks, and when I'm in the ground, he can write the book." When I retired, I thought, Jim, it'd be a better project if we could get started on it right away.
Yeah.
So what is in that book is the trust that Jim gave to me to tell a story, and I hope it's told well.
But when he moved out to the farm, he was in his natural environment, and he could create in that area all over again. There's one quote from Jim that I really love. There are a lot of quotes from Jim I love. But I feel obligated to create something in this world since I benefit from so much of what it gives to me. A place to live, food to eat, and air to breathe. That's a universal feeling that I feel almost all artists feel, especially eating.
Right. And the important thing is that hopefully I'm just a little minor part of all the artists that put together in any century an interpretation of our society.
Yes.
That hopefully will provide information for the future society. I mean, the only way we know anything about the arts of Greece and Rome is through the arts, and it's important that our civilization, instead of watching football all the time, should perhaps deal with the cultural aspects of our society a little bit more.
Absolutely on target.
That was my intent, at any rate. And I wish I had another lifetime, because I feel like I'm just getting started.
Well, I think you're going to have another lifetime.
Well, that's...
and that's the reason why I put...
debatable, but...
Well, it is debatable, but I think that you are. And, when we come... what you have done for Baltimore is just outstanding. And the crazy thing about this is that where can we see your work? And that's why I wanted to do this show, that at least Baltimore Museum should pay attention to this book especially.
Well, where can you see my work? What I have left, and I've been lucky enough to sell the majority of the pieces I've ever done.
That's most
I mean, I always had the philosophy, you do one piece, you only have to find one buyer. And I've been lucky enough and fortunate enough, even with my subject matter of the inner city, to sell an awful lot of paintings, which is, you know, I'm not making New York prices or anything. Believe me, it's been a survival, kind of an average of 10,000 a year, if anybody's interested in a minimal lifestyle. But you know, you can come to see what I have left at the studio, because most of the pieces are hanging in someone's living room, or I mean, each of the colleges owns a piece of my work, and they're scattered all over the entire community, the Mid-Atlantic region.
And it should probably be said that as much as the biography tells Jim's story and provides a sense of his life, it's also a catalog of his work, and it's an excellent retrospective, and we thought a lot about the people who've never been able to afford Jim's work, being able to get a copy of this book and really see the story that he tells of his life through the images he selected over the years.
Well,
There's at least 200 images of my paintings in the book, so included in the book.
and what paintings? My God, I'm so sorry that there aren't more available. I couldn't afford your work before, but now they're all gone.
I can always say the word commission.
Oh, you still can? We can still do that?
Well, I still I'm limited with a number of health issues, but you know, it's possible that I could, with the proper health care, I could possibly do some more commissions before I croak.
Well, both you and your life partner there are very much into nature.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about, and maybe, let's see, Lynn could add to this. Tell us a little bit about what's called the Gaia Effect, or...
Oh, the Gaia Effect?
Gaia Effect, and also there were, let's see, it's the, oh gosh, you guys...
There are whole books written about the Gaia Effect, and I can't even tell you the authors now, but I've read a number of them over the years, and it is basically simply that the Earth itself is a living organism, and that as we interfere with it, as we screw it up, it has a tendency to want to repair itself, and it will do most anything to maintain its validity. So you know, like I just want to paint not the negativity, but I want to paint the beauty of the nature, so that many people that look at it will get the idea that we shouldn't be screwing this up. That this is very, very important, and there's so many aspects to it that it's you know, if you take a shovel and you take a piece of lawn and you shovel the grass away, it only takes about a week before you've got plants coming up in that square that you just shoveled. And before long, the biggest ones will grow a little taller, and the next thing you know, you'll have trees growing there. So, I mean, the earth, if man would leave it alone, would turn green again.
Yes, that's true. That's true. The fairy walks. Lynn, can you tell us anything about the fairy walks?
Yes, I have been a very active member of our local fairy communities. We've hosted the Fairy Festival at Spoutwood Farm for 27 years. Now that's no longer at Spoutwood Farm. We switched it over to Marshy Point County Park in Middle River, but we did that last year, but then COVID hit, so we didn't. Actually, it wasn't last year. It was Yes, it was last year. I'm sorry. We have to wait and see what's going to happen, with COVID. But in Berkeley Springs, we're keeping the fairy community alive. We're trying to get together a springtime May Day Fairy Festival event there, if it's possible. So, yes, there's quite a few people up this way. Lots of creative artists here. There's a huge community of people who love nature just as much as we do. And we express our adoration in many different forms, fairies being one of them.
Thank you very much. Friends, we are about out of time. I want to thank you so much for joining us, Jim, William, and Lynn. And
thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you.
And, of course, if you want to get a copy of this book, tell us how to get a copy of your book.
Okay. You can go to our website, which is simply Mycelium Press, which is MYCELIUM Press.LLC, or you can go to Facebook, Mycelium Press LLC, for more information.
We're off now.